Okay, so in order of release of the ports, the first ones were Resident Evil Revelations and Resident Evil Revelations 2, which both use all capital letters in the game's title as well as in the game's logo. And then after that, they ported Resident Evil 0, 1, and 4, which also all followed the logo method of capitalization, because Resident Evil is in standard case, but Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil 4 are all lowercase because they thought that looked scarier. And then after that, Resident Evil 5 and 6 came out simultaneously. Resident Evil 6 is all uppercase, like the logo. Resident Evil 5 is standard case, even though the logo is also all uppercase, and no one knows why. And then afterwards, they released the cloud versions of Resident Evil 2, 3, 7, and 8, and those all follow what you'd expect, with Resident Evil 2 cloud, Resident Evil 3 cloud being all capitals, but Resident Evil 7 being wait, hold on. The Resident Evil 7's Cloud Edition having all caps for the main title, and then the subtitle Biohazard being all lowercase like in the logo. But after the Cloud Editions, the Switch 2 ports of Resident Evil 7, 8, and 9 all released simultaneously. Resident Evil 9 is correct in that it is all caps except for the subtitle, which is all lowercase. Resident Evil 7, however, is all standard case except for the subtitle, which is also all lowercase, which makes no sense because they already ported Resident Evil 7 correctly, and Resident Evil Village is all standard case, like all of it, even though the Village section is all uppercase, whereas Biohazard was all lowercase. This is gonna be the rest of the video. I mean, it's gonna be like slightly more interesting than that. I'd say it's like twice as interesting, but like based on how interesting that was, I can give you like an idea. This video is scheduled to release on the first day of Autism Awareness Month. This is a Nintendo Switch. I got it when I was 9 years old. This is a screen protector, but it was stuck on there for so many years that when I tried to replace it with a new screen protector, once it got so cracked, it was just solidified on there. There's a bit of paper in the fan, as well as the plastic having the Joy-Con rails are completely broken, and it doesn't matter anyways because the Joy-Cons broke literally a month after we got the Switch. And never bothered to replace them because they were $80 and Pro controllers worked just fine. Anyways, can we get misogynistic Leon Kennedy on there?
Women.
Hell yeah, thanks. So Capcom, right? I just cut out 188 words about Capcom's history because you know what we're here for. We're here to talk about Leon Kennedy everywhere you go. All 10 mainline Resident Evil games, as well as Revelations 1 and 2, were ported to the Nintendo Switch. And this process began in the launch year of the Nintendo Switch, when on November 28th, 2017, Resident Evil Revelations 1 and 2 released on the Nintendo Switch, and they sure are there. Revelations 1 was actually the perfect title to test the waters of how well RE would work on Switch's user base. It was originally a 3DS game before getting an HD remaster shortly after, released on the Wii U and also other consoles that don't matter, but the 3DS DNA runs deep in this game. Just like other games in the series post RE4, it has an episodic structure with clear chapter markers and ranks, but it actually works better on Switch than it does on 3DS or other home consoles. This episodic structure is perfect for playing portably, and the game was built around being portable. Sitting down for hours at a time for the gameplay to be the most shallow in the series makes the game really boring. This especially helps recontextualize the kind of narrative TV theme they have going on, with each chapter being called an episode and beginning with a recap of the last one. And it has the benefits of not being on the 3DS. 2 whole analog sticks. But you know, are they even really necessary? You see, Resident Evil Revelations on the Nintendo Switch introduces one of the biggest gaming innovations ever made. Motion controls! That's too loud. Weirdly enough, it also features a mechanic where you can trigger a reload by covering the IR sensor of the right Joy-Con, creating a supposedly more immersive experience. The reason that this is interesting is because it is the only instance in the entire Nintendo Switch library where the IR sensor actually does something interesting and useful. It shows a clear level of interest that Capcom had with the Nintendo Switch's unique features, even though in this instance it's pretty superfluous. On top of motion aiming and the IR sensor, the game also features more control options using the Switch's unique hardware. Particularly, you can use the touch screen to switch weapons. On top of that, you can also use the SL and SR buttons to switch which weapon you're holding using the dual grip control option, which is crazy. Like, this is the only Nintendo Switch 1 game that I can think of that actually uses the dual grip controls. I will try to put up every other game in editing that uses this feature.
Editing Anders here. It's just arms. It's just arms. Arms is the only one. I was expecting to pull up like 5 random indie games. You know, that would make sense. But it was just Revelations and arms.
I thought that was like a Switch 2 advertised feature with Cyberpunk. It was here the whole time? Honestly, it's kind of an addicting feature too, and it makes it hard to play other games without this, because you have to use the D-pad to switch weapons, which means you have to stop moving your character and touch the D-pad. This was such a good quality of life feature that the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro Controller came with grip left and grip right buttons that you can map to whatever you want, which I always map to weapons now. If you couldn't already tell, I don't have much to say regarding this version of the game, as it's already a Nintendo port of a Nintendo game, but despite that, I'd still say it's the best version of the game. As I said, the game was built to be played in short snippets on the 3DS. The Nintendo Switch is definitive because you can play it the way it was always meant to be played, while waiting for your boyfriend's physical therapy appointment or something. I don't know what kind of outdoor side quests you guys go on. This game actually has the bulk of its content outside of its main story. This game's version of the Mercenaries, the Raid mode, has an absurd amount of content and collectibles, and its main story is meant to be replayed for higher scores and unlockable costumes. The Raid mode is actually where another Switch exclusive feature comes in, the Amiibo functionality. Scanning any amiibo will give the player bonus points. That's it. I've heard that specifically Capcom amiibo yield better rewards, which at the time would have just been Mega Man from Smash Bros. And also a bit of misinformation floating around. This would make sense though, because the amiibo features aren't mentioned anywhere on the store's page aside from at the very bottom next to the fact that the game uses the touchscreen, and it's buried in the options menu. There's nothing there saying, hey, you can scan an amiibo. So I did a little investigating and found that every amiibo works identically. Unlike basically every other game where you can use amiibos to unlock consumables, the consumables in Revelations, you can just keep scanning amiibo infinitely. The theory obviously being, if you have more amiibo, you get to have more bonus points, which makes sense. But this also points to like a misunderstanding of the way that amiibo work. Like, I would go as far as to say that most people who have amiibo don't actually have the amiibo figurines that cost $10 a piece, because again, it's just an NFC tag with some ID on it. For instance, if you want to unlock all the outfits in Breath of the Wild, you need to have every Zelda amiibo ever released, which is ludicrous. So I got these from an Etsy shop that just have every Zelda amiibo on their own NFC tag. It's a little card. There we go. Oh no. Basically, anyone who has an amiibo will have dozens of amiibo and completely trivialize the entire challenge of the game mode. And even assuming that everyone who played the game is a little saint who would never steal even the tiniest cent from the biggest company ever. Since the release of Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival in 2015, I believe, there have been these amiibo cards for every Animal Crossing villager that have different rarities and such, so that they're trading cards. But they react the same in Revelations as any other amiibo, which means that even if you're buying just like a card pack, like a trading card pack, you still have more than enough amiibo to completely destroy the entire game. This was such a clearly half-baked mechanic, but it spoke to Capcom trying to get back to Nintendo's favor after they kind of abandoned them during the Wii U generation. I mean, using all of this, I was able to get enough bonus points to be able to purchase the rocket launcher without putting in any effort, which is what you need to unlock this costume. And yeah, I played this game when I was 13. I think this awakened something in me. And then comes Resident Evil Revelations 2, which is an evil video game because it released episodically, starting in early 2015 for current and last-gen consoles of the time, with the Nintendo Switch version being the only version that doesn't have the chance of buying a duplicate video game or whatever. I speak in jest. The PS4 version of Revelations 2 has the deluxe edition that has all of the content under a singular package, and I believe that currently, during the 30th anniversary of Resident Evil sale, they have that same bundle on Steam, so you can get this game pretty easily on everything. But honestly, I prefer the Switch version, because there is something to be said about the peace of mind that comes with every single piece of content being available in a singular download. It's 23.6 gigabytes. In case you forgot, the original model of the Nintendo Switch had 32 gigabytes of internal storage, a lot of which was taken up by the console's internal operating system. You cannot download this game unless you have already purchased an extra peripheral, already raising the cost. I mean, it makes sense. This was a current-gen game in 2017, and Nintendo wasn't doing their evil compression magic on a third-party title, but this completely kneecaps this version of the game. Unless, with this bad boy, you can accomplish so many things, like being a transition in a YouTube video, a really annoying transition in a YouTube video that a bunch of people will already have left comments about, feeding me engagement, feeding me views, feeding me money, which I can use to buy food, because I'm graduating high school in a couple months, and I really don't have a backup plan in case FAFSA falls through. Now that you can actually play Revelations 2, you can notice the greatest invention in video game history again. Motion controls! Wait, Where are the motion controls? Hold on. Okay, so you have to use the Joy-Cons. You have to hold the Joy-Cons in separate hands. The IR reload is still present, but you can also shake the left Joy-Con to escape enemy grabs. You can swing the right Joy-Con to use the knife, and only the right Joy-Con is used for aiming. Who cares about the left-handed, I guess? This just feels wrong. What am I missing to make this work? Yes. Yes. Yeah. This is a Wii game now. Not like the other Resident Evil games that were actually on the Wii that I don't own physical copies of. This makes the Switch version of Revelations 2 the definitive way to play, because the Steam port is stupid and still purchased episodically. It is not to be trusted. While the Switch port has all of the content installed from the start, it's cheaper, it has amiibo functionality that... Okay, in between writing this and filming this, I did some more testing, and it turns out that in Revelations 2, unlike Revelations 1, the amiibo do something slightly different. In Revelations 2, bonus points are used to unlock perks in the campaign instead of used to purchase weapons in the raid mode. The raid mode uses a separate currency, gold, and the amiibo, once again, have like a random chance of offering between 1,000 and 10,000 bonus points, or between 1,000 and 10,000 gold. And that just doesn't work. That just doesn't work at all, because in the game, you can purchase 5,000 raid mode gold with 1,000 bonus points. They literally just shoehorned it in and said between 1 and 10,000 without looking at the fact that that just doesn't work at all for the way that the in-game economy has an existing conversion rate between those two currencies. It makes me want to die. Luckily, though, with raid mode gold being available this time, you can easily unlock all the costumes and I think this awakened something in me. These ports were successful. Revelations 1 and 2 sold hella copies on Switch despite their drawbacks, and as such, Capcom decided to continue their relationship with the Nintendo Switch, publishing Mega Man 11, Okami, probably some other slop, I don't know. Then, in 2019, my video gets to continue with the release of the Resident Evil Origins collection. A port of Resident Evil 4 also released on the same day, I believe using the assets in either the PC's 2015 version, the Ultimate HD Edition, or the 2013 PS3's normal HD Edition, but the documentation on that version is surprisingly scarce. I don't know. Nevertheless, Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil 1 have both been remastered in HD and ported to the Nintendo Switch, and they work really well here. Obviously, these ports existed beforehand. The Resident Evil 1 HD remaster released in 2015, including for PS3, so there's no reason the Switch wouldn't be able to run it, but the 2015 remaster was, Okay, so I'm going to say something that's probably going to get a ton of comments. This game heavily utilized artificial intelligence. Yes, it was 2015. AI has meant many things over the years, and the current iteration of machine learning is in fact not the same as AI was understood years ago. Regrettably, I must include an interjection, because in between everything, NVIDIA just announced DLSS 5, which really messed a bunch of stuff up. I intended to release this video before RE9 came out, and it took so long that RE9 started being used for tech showcases by NVIDIA. Yesterday, as of writing this, probably a month ago as of releasing this, and like 2 weeks ago, as of filming this, NVIDIA announced DLSS 5, which, I'm sorry, I have to get technical here. Upscaling has been happening for like a decade at this point, which is taking a low quality image and making it a high quality image by increasing the number of pixels in it. It usually doesn't look great. This is pretty uncontroversial. DLSS upscaling is different. DLSS is exclusive to NVIDIA's graphics cards, which means just new graphics cards for PCs, and recently, the Nintendo Switch 2 was the first game console to partner with NVIDIA to use this proprietary technology. Remember that. It'll be important in like 30 to 40 minutes. DLSS 1.0 and 2.0 both work to upscale images in real time. The theory is that running the game at a lower resolution and then using math to make it look like a higher resolution is easier on the computer than running the game at a high resolution natively. But it's possible that this would make the game look waxy and weird. The way that DLSS fixes this is by using like so much math. Motion vectors, brightness and saturation values, and it looks pretty good. DLSS 3.0 and 4.0 took it a step further with frame generation. The game intentionally causes a little bit of lag so that it can take a picture of 2 frames and create an in-between frame based on the same math that DLSS 2 used. None of this is the generative AI that ChatGPT, Gemini, Midjourney, etc. use, and no one is mad about this aside from it kind of just being a bad product. Recently, DLSS 5 was revealed, of course, which instead of upscaling frames to look better or increasing the number of frames to be more responsive, tries to make frames look more realistic using NVIDIA's existing AI deep learning model that is trained on images from across the internet, I think. This was only unveiled yesterday as of writing this. As of recording this, Jensen Huang, CEO of NVIDIA, specified that the model does use the same math that DLSS 2 used, and particularly it also uses uses ray tracing. It uses the information from each of the light rays that are bouncing around to try and make the lighting of the game look more realistic, which, from NVIDIA's website. Instead of being trained per game, it uses a single comprehensive model trained to understand semantic elements like skin, fabric, and environmental lighting across different games. Instead of being trained per game, it uses a single comprehensive model. So like this is the thing that everyone's mad at. It's supposed to keep the game's art style intact by using the game's geometry and textures, but from the screenshots that they've showed off, it absolutely does not keep the original art style intact. This is a whole Portal RTX fiasco all over again, where in 2022 they released a version of Portal that completely changed all of the assets to be more complex so that light could bounce off of them in pretty ways, but it just looked worse than the game from 2007. So DLSS 5 is the only thing here that could be called generative AI in the way that everyone gets mad at. Interjection out. Back to the video. They took something that wasn't AI, called it AI because it sounded impressive, and now everyone says AI is the devil. I heard someone get mad that Spotify Wrapped used AI, and when someone said there's no way Spotify Wrapped could be created without AI, this person said that it was what Spotify had done every year before. I am being very careful with my words so I don't get yelled at by tech bros and Twitter artists alike, so allow me to clarify that AI image generation, specifically in the use case of replacing artists who would have gotten the job had this AI image generation technology not been made so readily available, bad. Resident Evil 1 HD Remaster, the 2019 Nintendo Switch port of the 2015 multi-platform remaster of the 2002 GameCube remake of the 1996 PlayStation 1 spiritual successor of the 1989 Famicom adaptation of the 1989 Japanese horror film Sweet Home. The use of upscaling in this game was simply on the backgrounds, and to make the game fit in widescreen, the backgrounds are zoomed in and pan as the player moves. The way that RE1 worked was already having extremely realistic 3D renders of environments, and having those as a PNG in the background to save a lot of computing power, allowing the character models to use all of those sweet polygons without the game running at 2 frames a second. The remaster just kind of took the images in the background and put them into a machine learning model that would make the images 1080p, so it just kind of makes everything waxy and smooth. This is pretty noticeable playing the PlayStation versions on a big TV, kind of noticeable playing the PC version on a monitor that I really need to clean, and it looks so good on the Nintendo Switch in handheld mode, I cannot stress enough how hard this goes on Switch. The only flaw is that the game runs at a locked 30 FPS when it really shouldn't have to. I suspect the game was having trouble dipping into the 50s when at 60, so they locked it to 30 so the dips weren't distracting. Surely this is something that Capcom will continue to do in the future, but it's Resident Evil 1. The game lives on its atmosphere. The frame rate is literally irrelevant because the game already feels clunky and like it drops inputs all the time. If this was a problem in the other RE games, I would mind, but it's got fixed camera angles. They surprisingly didn't remove anything, including the leaderboards that have been completely broken since forever. Don't look at that. I'm pretty sure they still have the secret screen for beating the game on the hardest difficulty where all of the enemies are invisible. I can't confirm whether that's true, as I'd rather die than go through that again, but the good news is that with the Nintendo Switch you can slowly work away at that goal. Resident Evil has an award for beating it in under 3 hours. You can do another challenge run of the game in a single play session, or if you're an American like me, a single round trip of public transit. I would hope I'm familiar enough with the game to play it that fast. I mean, I played the game for the first time when I was 13, and I think this awakened something in me. Resident Evil 4, wait, shit, I forgot to talk about, hold on, we can't go to Resident Evil 4 yet, we have to talk about Resident Evil 0. RE0 is literally so bad that it's unplayable no matter what platform it's on. Not because of the port's quality, but just because the game itself is garbage. If you want a physical version of it though, RE1 on Switch only comes in the Origins Collection cartridge, which has 0 and 1, and 0 is the one on the cartridge, because there wasn't enough space on the cartridge to have both of the games, because they're like 16 gigabytes and there was only a 32 gigabyte card. So Resident Evil 0 is the one on the cartridge, and it just has a download code for Resident Evil 1. So there is no physical version of the game that is by far and away more popular with fans and the public. I'm so sorry, Rebecca. I know that the Switch version comes included with all your pretty t-shirts, also making it the definitive version of the game in the Switch port. I mean, playing this game for the first time when I was 13, I think this awakened something in me. I love you, Rebecca. Be in a better game next time. RE4 was the first of the second Resident Evil trilogy to be ported to the Nintendo Switch, as part of an ongoing joke that RE4 has been ported to everything under the sun. Launching for the GameCube, then being ported to the PS2, Windows, the Wii, early iPhones, the Brazilian Zibo, which was kind of just a phone you plugged into a TV, it was really weird, the PS3 and Xbox 360, Android phones, the PS4 and Xbox One, then the Nintendo Switch, and even after the Switch it was ported to the MetaQuest 2, with all of the horniness surgically removed. And now the time has come. I regret to inform you, it seems like the RE4 port on the Nintendo Switch was a bit of a rush job. For years, many have considered the Wii port the definitive version. It has all of the content, it looks the best because the game's textures never got updated with all the re-releases, and seeing GameCube 240p textures in 1080p is questionable. And, most importantly, motion controls for the Wii this time. Motion controls have been popular on Nintendo consoles since the Wii. The PS4 version of Revelations 1 and 2 didn't have motion controls, but the Nintendo Switch ports did. Therefore, the Nintendo Switch version of RE4 should have motion controls. While the gyroscope in the Joy-Con and Pro Controller aren't as accurate as the infrared sensors in the Wiimote, the fact that this version of the game is portable, and the fact that this is the first time the full game is available on the go, makes this the definitive version. Wait, where are the motion controls? Where are the motion controls? I really can't express how much better the Wii version of RE4 is than any other version of the game. It was the basis for the motion controls in Revelations 1 and 2. It had like the same shake to escape an enemy grab and swing the knife with the right stick. The Wii version allowed the player to swing the knife twice as fast because you can shake the remote instead of readying the knife with a separate button, already making the experience of the game more smooth. But on top of that, it's the version of the game with the best aiming of all of them. Suddenly, not being able to move while shooting isn't an issue, because the gun aims where you do, and the sluggish act of aiming at the center of the screen, then moving where you're aiming to the head, is shortened to just aiming at the head and then pulling up the gun. This was just such an intuitive and smooth control system. As for the Switch version, I mean, it's serviceable. I do have fond memories of playing RE4 on Switch during a road trip where we stayed at my mom's friend's house while her friend was actively in the process of a divorce. I personally have loving parents, but getting to play a game from 2005 with arguing parents in the background really made this playthrough feel the most authentic. The Switch version is the version where I had the truly definitive RE4 experience, so I mean, it can't be completely discounted. I mean, I first played the game on the Wii when I was 12, but I didn't really remember much of what was happening in the background. I was focusing on, I think this awakened something in me. After the success of these ports, Capcom had a decision to make. Resident Evil 5 and 6 are some of the best-selling Resident Evil games, being extremely commercially successful, and also extremely critically a failure. People hate these games. People hate RE5 and RE6, and I am literally shaking as I record this, trying not to talk more about RE6, because if I talked about RE6, this video would be like 100 hours long, but not now. I'm supposed to be talking about RE5. RE5 is the video game that we're talking about. RE5 and 6 released simultaneously in October of 2019, 5 months after the Origin Collection and RE4. Seeing as RE5 and 6 ran on the same engine and were both released for 7th gen consoles, the porting process for both was likely pretty similar, which is the only reason I assume they ported RE6 despite RE5 selling better and having a much better reputation. The first thing you'll notice when opening RE5 is the Joy-Con disclaimer. I'm home. The second thing you'll notice is that in the settings menu, you'll find something very important. Motion control. Ow. That's right, Resident Evil 4's unforgivable sin has been fixed, with RE5 having motion controls and all of the content from every version of RE5 on a single download and local communication to make co-op easy. This is literally the definitive version of RE5. The Steam port was from 2009 for Windows 8 or whatever. It's completely broken and for some reason has a weird crosshair that no other version of the game has, but RE5 on Switch is literally the best version of the game and no one talks about it. The motion controls are admittedly tuned a bit weirdly and take some time to get used to, especially because they don't actually tell you what they entail. There are sensitivity options now. Those weren't in Revelations, but unlike Revelations, the game doesn't tell you what the motion controls allow. You can escape from a grab by shaking the left Joy-Con, you can swing the knife with the right Joy-Con, and you once again aim with only the right Joy-Con, but you can't reload by swinging the right Joy-Con down, and you can maybe reload with the IR sensor? Maybe? I don't know, because my Joy-Cons broke. The good news is that the motion controls in RE5 do work with the Pro Controller, unlike Revelations where you could only use the motion aiming if you also had the Joy-Cons equipped, which was just a weird thing. Nevertheless, on my most recent playthrough of RE5, I was having the time of my life. It felt like new life was breathed into the least good Resident Evil game. I said least good, okay, it's fine, but it's no RE6. The perfect 7 out of 10 experience. I was even able to get all 30 BSAA emblems in only one playthrough, unlocking the tribal outfit for Sheva. It's pretty bad. It's like there is a native tribe in the game, but she's not part of that tribe, and she's much lighter skinned. I mean, I played this game when I was 13, and I think this awakened something in me.
Apparently some people need to be told that this is a bit racist. First thing I'm gonna get into. I am not too well studied on forms of tribal paint in Africa. I know about my country's tribal paint, which, check it. So lower coverage tribal paint like is seen in the tribal outfit is gonna be more common in a lot of like South and Central Turtle Island, and not as much in Africa. While it is still present, it's not gonna be like as present as more of the like full body, very like a lot of paint, you know, along with the animal skin she seems to be wearing. So she's wearing jaguar skin. Jaguars are in South America. Like, full stop. The jaguar skin bikini that she has going on, not African, not even in the slightest. She has a little machete, which I will give a pass to the machete, because I'm a big fan of a machete. Now, the jewelry, bit of a mixed bag here. There's, you know, like the longer quill beadwork on the choker and one of the armbands, and I believe the bangle is wood. That is very common in a lot of African tribes, and I'm not gonna ascribe this outfit to any specific African tribe, because it's just not. It's not. It honestly, my main problem with this is how much they thought tribal, which tribal is a purely European word used to describe other cultures, more democratic or whatever, like systems of I don't want to say government seems wrong, but societies. Also, again, she has like pin straight hair in the game. But aside from those pieces, everything else seems to be very native in origin. She's got some beadwork on. Her, what would most commonly be for like African tribes a drinking gourd, she has a drinking skin, which there are drinking skins all over the world. I will give them that. But, you know, if you're trying to represent African tribes, which I don't think they were trying to represent shit, I think they were just like fetishizing a culture. But if you're trying to represent African tribes, it would more commonly be a gourd. But she has some beadwork on, which you can see. The heels, not even gonna touch the heels. The heels are just bad. Open-toed shoes? Girl. But then we get to the most damning bit, and that's the fucking eagle feathers over her, like, pelvic area. It's a bikini. It's a bikini. She's wearing a tiny little mini skirt bikini in the fucking jungle. And, you know, she's got the hoops in. That's not bad. Oh my god, I just noticed there's fucking tribal paint on her tits. Holy fetish, Batman. While there are eagle species in other parts of the world, the usage of eagle feathers only appear in American indigenous practices. And when I say America, you know what, fuck it. Indigenous Turtle Islands cultures, tribes, etc. The usage of them here makes it seem like whoever designed this specific outfit went, ooh, that's hot, and just didn't look into it further. Overall, the overwhelming majority of the outfit being just like jaguar skin is very much just, okay, yeah, you didn't do any research at all. Because it is overwhelmingly South American on a character that isn't. In an outfit that isn't supposed to be. The whole concept of lumping together every, like, black and brown culture as one, just to fetishize them all at once, it is racist. It's a racist practice that people use specifically to fetishize cultures. Especially if it's the idea of a culture being primitive, or like, oh, they're so unadvanced that they don't even wear clothes, but like, maybe they're not unadvanced. Maybe they're, like, ahead of their time. Isn't that so hot, bro? Which is bad. It's fetishistic. It's very white. It's a very white frat boy anthropology degree way of going about other cultures. I don't know how to end this. Indigenous dog boy, call that Ojibwe.
Resident Evil 6. I can't talk about it in this video because this video would be dozens of hours long. I'm specifically talking about the Switch port and the differences and what makes the Switch port specifically interesting rather than what makes the video game Resident Evil 6 interesting. So anyway, I have 40 hours on RE6 just on Switch. Let's start with the changes. Motion controls. They are by far the most important in this game, more so than any other game mentioned so far. Aiming on controller sucks. Sticks suck so much that the game needs to cheat for you with aim assist. Aiming with mouse is good because you can make smooth movements with a lot of space. You can use your entire arm for sweeping motions, your wrist for flicking motions. The tiniest movements are easy on a mouse, while on a controller, the stick's tiny movements are really difficult and needed tons of correction. Gyro fills this gap. Tiny movements are possible for lining up tiny headshots, making the game feel way more fluid and energetic. I'm explaining this now because RE6, more than any other game so far, requires motion control to be enjoyable. RE4 and 5 have long stun animations and lock the player in place while shooting, compensating for the natural shortcomings of sticks. 6 is much more modern, and enemy behaviors have been adjusted to compensate. And this version of RE6 is the only one with motion controls. I did play the PS4 version for more than 200 hours, but after playing the game on Switch, I can never go back. Not just for the improved controls, but for a more fundamental change. RE6 has several online modes, for reasons that I will not explain, that remain today mostly forgotten. This was the main way to unlock costumes for each of the game's 7 protagonists. Yes, this game has 7 protagonists, for reasons I will not explain, and each has 3 costumes. The first is unlocked by getting an A rank in the Mercenaries mode. The second is by signing up for Resident Evil mobile app, website, whatever, on the original versions of the game for Gen 7 consoles, including PC, or by playing the weird online modes in the 8th gen console ports, except on Nintendo Switch. The Switch version, likely because who in their right minds would still be playing the weird online modes of RE6 in 2019, is the only version of the game where all of the content is actually accessible, simply by getting the highest possible S ranks in the Mercenaries mode as each character. You'll notice I specified who would still be playing RE6's weird online mode, because the game also has all of the online modes and the servers still work. I couldn't find a match because obviously, but this is a level of dedication that was simply not necessary for the most universally despised and reviled game in the entire Resident Evil series. 240 hours though. And that's not all, because this also is the only version of the game in which you can actually use these costumes in the main campaign instead of just in the weird stupid online modes. However, there is one crucial flaw with this version of the game. It runs like shit. I mean, it shouldn't. This game released on the Xbox 360 of all things, a console with 512 megabytes of RAM. Compared to the Switch's 4 gigabytes, this should be a total home run, but the game runs okay. Sometimes. It's weird. Remember RE1 had a 30 FPS cap because the game ran at 60 most of the time, but sometimes dipped to 50, and the game running at a consistent 30 was better than like the distracting of the 50 and 60? So they couldn't do that with Resident Evil 6. The game would still drop to around 20 or like 10 during some of the most intense action sequences. They just didn't put a cap on the game at all. So in some sections it runs at a perfect 60, while in others it runs at Google Slides. Unless, I mean, if it's just a processing power issue. What if I could play my Switch 1 game with more processing power? This is a Nintendo Switch 2. I waited in line for several hours to be one of the first people in the United States of America to get cucked by Mr. Antenna from Devil's Room Chapter 3 in real time. With the Switch 2, the game runs at a solid 1080p 60 FPS all the time, except not all of the time still. It's the best way to play the game. I loved playing as Helena with glittery stripper cop thigh highs and the miniest skirt I don't even know if I can show on YouTube. I loved playing as Ada in her original cocktail dress that also turns on jiggle physics that previously didn't exist. I loved playing as Sherry in her default costume because I played this game when I was 13, and Sherry with like a really big coat was my first ever fictional crush. This joke has been removed during the recording stage. I only very recently discovered that my mom watches my videos. Regardless, I need to keep the bit going, so I think this game awakens something in me. The year is 2022. Mr. Capcom, we need more Switch ports. What games could we possibly port? The original versions of RE1, 2, and 3 are worthless with the remakes out, and 7 and 8 are too modern. If we tried to run any of those on the Nintendo Switch, it would look like it would be a PR disaster. But what if we didn't run them on Switch? Do you guys know that Resident Evil 7, 2-make, and 3-make were remastered in 2022? There's no reason you would know that. They did absolutely no marketing for it, but each of the games added support for ray tracing, and they all look worse than they did before because the environments weren't built with ray tracing in mind. RE8 always had ray tracing though, so it isn't as much of an issue there. These got physical releases for PS5, which is pretty sweet. Having the game all be physically available without the need for a patch like a lot of other PS5 games is great for preservation, and especially great for people with poor internet connections. The Nintendo Switch was blessed with Cloud Edition ports of RE2 Make, RE3 Make, RE7 Gold Edition, and RE8 Not Gold Edition. These were all released in October and November of 2022, and they seem fairly innocuous on the surface. Because they are, the way it works is by using the power of the internet to send your inputs to a powerful computer hundreds, if not thousands of miles away, those inputs being processed on that computer, then sending back to the visual of those results. Now you might say, even when there isn't any need to worry about input latency, streaming content in 1080p is already extremely difficult. What about compression and resolution scaling, and most of all, input latency? And you would be very correct about all of those things. These cloud ports sold terribly, otherwise they would have made a cloud port of RE4 Remake that came out just a few months later. But weirdly enough, RE8's DLC did get a cloud port in December of 2022, after the DLC initially released in October, like around the same time that the original cloud version released. It's weird. I played through the demos of each of them that they have to offer, and they ran decently well on my Wi-Fi, which was surprising, given I live in a relatively small town with poor coverage. To be fair, Capcom is probably the best company to do this, as RE7 actually already did have a cloud version release on Switch in May of 2018, although only in Japan where average internet speeds are far higher. But obviously, you're going to want to be playing these with an Ethernet connection. This is the moment when you realize the original model of the Nintendo Switch 1 didn't have an Ethernet port. And also, it's called the Nintendo Switch. It is a portable console with an HDMI port attached to it. If you can't play this while being a passenger princess, what's even the point? Here's me playing it on the school Wi-Fi during the computer science class that I'm currently failing.
Can you take your socks and shoes off, and then I'll like back up so your feet are just like settling in the freaking...
Yeah, that's really important for the audience. Here's me playing it on the train that runs to Albuquerque. The more interesting thing about these ports is that these are the only RE games that don't cost a consistent $20. Every other game on this list cost $20, but these games were still technically current gen when the ports released. Resident Evil 2 was $40. Resident Evil 7 Gold Edition is $40. Resident Evil Village is $40, and the DLC is available separately for $20. Resident Evil 3 is $30. It's gonna cause a Category 7 autism event, dude. RE3 is the best game in the series. Okay, that's not true. RE4 Remake is objectively better, but RE3 is my favorite for a multitude of reasons. RE3's peak, reason number one, the story is good. Shut up. I know that that's a very controversial stance to take. This is the game in the series that has been most often criticized for its poor storytelling, one-dimensional villain, short length, but actually, all of that stuff is awesome and good, actually. Some history. So imagine you're Capcom and you've been making video games for this company, Nintendo, and then they like really mess up and decide that their new console, the N64, is going to be measurably 10 times more limited than the competition. So you have to betray them and start publishing your games for Sony's PlayStation that uses discs that have like 700 megabytes compared to the N64's cartridges that could only store 64 megabytes at most. Okay, you make Resident Evil 1 and 2, and now you're working on a spin-off called Resident Evil 1.9 that takes place in between the events of those two games while working on Resident Evil 3 called Veronica for the Dreamcast.
Cross-dressing freak!
Sony is not going to be happy about that. And it would also be kind of silly to have the mainline series be on separate consoles. So let's just take this spin-off that is a spin-off and not a main game, it is a spin-off, and pretend it is a main game. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis is just RE Nemesis, and when you understand that, the remake starts to make a whole lot more sense. The development of RE3 Remake isn't as clear as RE2, which began the conceptual stage in 2015 and likely only entered full production after RE7's conclusion. All we know is that it took about 3 years to complete and started after RE2 Make, although there was some overlap in development time. RE3 is an expansion, a glorified DLC pack of RE2. RE1 had Chris and Jill, RE2 had Chris's sister finding out what was happening to Chris, RE3 is just, hey, what was Jill up to during that time? I don't know, let's go find out. And because of that, its story doesn't need to be good. It is a supplement to a bigger, more important, more polished game, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. The story of RE3 is like a corny B-movie, because it's a spin-off meant to be part of a story that doesn't matter. Have some fun with it, alright? The gameplay is more action-oriented, so the story can be a bit sillier too. RE2 had like a lot of child death. RE3 doesn't even have any children, because it would completely spoil the campy tone of the game. And RE3's story is good for what it is, and that's not saying it's good, because why did you expect it to be good? This is good action game plot, and not a good horror game plot, because it isn't a horror game, because the gameplay is much more action focused, which brings me to RE3's peak reason number 2, is more fun to play than any other game in the series. RE3 is more action focused than RE7 and 2, but doesn't tip too far in the action directions of RE5 and 6. Rather, the action gameplay in RE3 is wholly unique to the series. To begin with, the UI is remixed to fit this action perspective. The hotkeys menus are much larger on screen, rounded to give off a less harsh and oppressive tone, off-center so you can still focus on the action while switching between weapons, and the full inventory screen is centered. Using the same inventory management system as RE2, and a similar, although tweaked third-person perspective, RE3 has the same dynamic push and pull of inventory management and item boxes, choosing what resources to utilize at what times. But the differences come in the way the game is structured. RE3 is an almost completely linear experience. There is very little backtracking to areas that you've already been to, and rarely will key items take up more than 1 or 2 slots in your inventory, allowing you to focus on how to allocate the ammo and weapons you want to bring into each scenario. This makes the game extremely replayable, and that replayability is encouraged because RE3's peak, reason number 3, you've all been playing it wrong. Okay, so RE2 had 3 difficulties: assisted, standard, and hardcore. And these were all unlocked from the start, and the only difference was enemy health values and, of course, saves being limited. RE3 has 5. You have to beat the game on standard to unlock hardcore. You have to beat the game on hardcore to unlock nightmare. You have to beat the game on nightmare to unlock inferno. And for each of them, you're expected to improve and unlock more bonus weapons from the extra content shop. RE3 has an addictive gameplay loop in which you unlock more items to make future playthroughs easier, but still have the joy of optimization, knowing where important key items are located, being able to take efficient routes, and use your limited inventory space to the fullest. RE3 is incredibly short. It can easily be beaten in under 2 hours, and one's first playthrough is probably going to be below 10. But if you stopped playing the game on the first playthrough, you played the game wrong. RE3 is a fantastic spin-off of RE2 that remixes the assets and setting of the game to make a great supplemental work showcasing compelling characters and fun gameplay. And it's not for everyone, but saying that it's objectively bad is close-minded. But there's a problem with this framing. If it's a spin-off and it's shorter, why was it $60 at launch and still, to this day, equally as expensive as RE2 and RE3 on the PlayStation Store and Steam? This fundamentally makes people expect more from the game than what is offered to them. And if it weren't for the capitalist hellscape in which we are entrapped, people wouldn't be hating on this game for its length because of worthless appeals to hours, dollars conversions or whatever. But for some godforsaken reason, the Nintendo Switch version of RE3 is the only version of the game where it has a price point corresponding to the markers of price that we would expect. And as such, I believe that this version of the game may have actually inspired people to give this game the second look it deserves to be remembered as one of the greats. It's a smaller game. It has a smaller price tag, it has smaller ambitions, but it pulls off its incredibly tight focus exceptionally well. Why is only the awful cloud version of the game the version which accurately represents it. There's an update though. There's an update to all of the stuff that I just said. For the Resident Evil 30th anniversary sale, exclusively on Steam, RE3 was put on a deep discount of 90%, making it the cheapest RE game on Steam, a whole $1 cheaper than what every other game in the series was discounted to. I don't know what to make of this, and bizarrely enough, while I was setting up recording for the video, this isn't even in the script, just while I was setting up recording of this specific video, so you can see all of the Resident Evil games on the Switch eShop, except Resident Evil 3 Cloud Edition is currently 66% off. It's only $10, which is still a terrible deal because it's the cloud version. But Resident Evil 2 Cloud and Resident Evil 8 Cloud and Resident Evil 7 Cloud aren't on sale at all, just Resident Evil 3 Cloud Edition. And I don't know why that is the case, because it's the same sale event that it's Resident Evil's 30th anniversary, so they're having the big sale going on, but why is Resident Evil 3 Cloud Edition the only cloud game that is on sale? The rest of the games are on sale. I already bought them, so it doesn't show that, but they're all on sale, except for, it's just Resident Evil 3. And why? Out of respect, I tried playing the cloud version of RE3, and it didn't have motion controls, so this is a terrible port, and they ruined one of my favorite games of all time, and you should play the game on PC. Not just for the mouse controls, but also, this was the first game I got when I built my first gaming PC, and it was the first game I ever modded. I think this awakened something in me. Wait. I'd like to apologize to my audience, and more broadly to humanity. I'm sorry, women. The act of modding a video game to have its characters be more conventionally attractive in a sort of doll way is representative of many flaws in our patriarchal society, and the ways in which we view video game characters and fictional representations of women as a whole. A rhetorical question: what was I doing at age 14 when I thought it was hot to put Jill in a Christmas sweater? I didn't download any nude mods. The Mormon guilt was too strong. I was raised Mormon. I almost threw up when I saw all the nude mods, but I did download the turtleneck sweater mod. That was a joke earlier in the RE4 section where I was like, I think this awakened something in me, and it was Ashley wearing a sweater. But what was I realistically gaining from that? A costume to make the game more enjoyable? Yes, but at the cost of what? For those nude mods, those plentiful nude mods, the purpose certainly can't be for sexual gratification. As funny as it may be to insinuate the opposite, Resident Evil 3 cannot be played only with one hand. Rather, this is a sort of mental pleasure that comes from the fact that this is a woman who can pose for you, strip for you, and can't say no. It's a power fantasy over an object, objectification in its rawest form, taking the female body and stripping it of its context. It makes no sense for the world of the game, and immersion is completely shattered, but it is precisely that juxtaposition that gives it its purpose. The thing that this awakened was not something admirable, not a liberation, but an oppression. The issue, of course, being that I wasn't oppressing anyone. Objectifying an object is no crime, and the only harm it could reasonably be construed as is its influence on my perspective towards women more broadly. Did it speak to an inherent willingness to play along with a game of patriarchy? A subconscious perspective that would take months or years to rewire after having been raised in a Mormon household in the inherently sexist country of the United States? Or did it speak to a liberation of the guilt forced upon me by both of these institutions? Does this action speak to my character in the 8th grade? Or does this action call to a deeper, unhealthy attitude towards women? Honestly, I'm not sure. The running joke in this video has been how playing these games when I was young had influences on my taste in men and women in adulthood. But I wonder if that's a healthy or even neutral stance to take. Because I'm still uncertain about whether or not these even did have an effect on me, I will be ending the running joke here, and certainly not ending the video. Okay, so I was going to cut to the next section, but I can't yet because after Resident Evil 9 released on the Nintendo Switch 2, Leon Kennedy became such like a popular character that there was a picture I took. I'll put it up in editing, but there was like a couple days where Resident Evil 2 Cloud Edition was in the top 50 best-selling games, but like now all of them are back at the bottom. Like you can't find the sales numbers for the cloud versions. But RE2 Cloud Edition was for a time successful just because of Leon Kennedy, and I think that's pretty funny. Okay, next bit. The Resi 7 and Resi 8 cloud ports did so poorly that in an attempt to win back favor with Nintendo fans, Capcom released native ports to the Nintendo Switch 2 alongside the release of Resident Evil 9 Requiem on February 27, 2026. I'll start with my thoughts on Resident Evil 9 because they're obviously the most boring. RE9 launched day and date. It doesn't have any DLC because it hasn't released yet, and it doesn't have any changes because, obviously. It does have motion controls, which is awesome, but that's also on the PS5 version. I'm glad that the gyro activism I've been doing throughout this video so far has retroactively convinced Capcom that it's a feature worth implementing. The game does have a single tiny piece of bonus content. Hypothetically. It will hypothetically have a tiny piece of bonus content in the future with the release of the Grace and Leon amiibo figurines that look a little rough. I'll admit, a little rough. Who am I kidding? They're both still going in the jar. By far the most interesting thing about RE9 is just how it runs on the Switch 2. I mean, this is a bit weaker on paper than a PS5, so how did they manage to run it at mostly 60 FPS with only a few dips? Well, remember our good friend Resident Evil 1 Remake HD Remaster 2015? And how it took just 480p assets and used AI, update, not the AI you're thinking of, but it shares the same name as the AI that you're probably thinking of because NVIDIA is evil, to make them 1080p? So like, what if we did that 60 times a second? That's right, RE9 runs in docked mode at a resolution of 540p and then uses DLSS DLSS 2.0 upscaling to render up to 1080p. NVIDIA is doing magic with their DLSS 2.0 technology, because what do you mean it's easier for the computer to take 60 images a second and recreate them than it is for the computer to just run the images at a high resolution? And if you're playing in handheld mode, the game actually runs at 360p before being upscaled. I don't know, I just thought that was neat. Now I'm going to share some thoughts on RE9 that I don't think I'll get to share anywhere else. For those of you returning from RE9 spoilers, I'm going to start talking about RE7 and RE8's native ports now because I have absolutely no idea when to stop talking, and the video will only end when I stop having information to share. RE7 Gold Edition on Switch 2 has what you'd expect at this point. It's a plain port of the game with all of the DLC included, and it is in fact the only version of the game with all of the DLC included. Even buying the Gold Edition on Steam only purchases the Season Pass, which includes this season pass, what? There is a separate purchase of $2 that unlocks Madhouse difficulty without having to beat the game on normal first, and a bunch of coins that you can carry in your inventory to get stat boosts. And I also found this on the PS4 version of the game store, not the PS5 version with ray tracing though. The Switch version of the game is the only version of the game to have all of these included with the purchase of Gold Edition, although the Gold Edition is the only version available. Imagine my shock having played RE7 over a dozen times since the 7th grade, and opening the Switch 2 version only to be surprised by having a ton of unlockables I've literally never seen before. If you were also surprised by this, I regret to inform you that these do nothing but clog up space in the item box and make it harder to sort through your items because the Assault coin only boosts your attack by 6%, which is nowhere near enough to actually cross any damage thresholds, and RE7 has perhaps the most limited inventory space in the entire series. Additionally, the game has solved the unforgivable crime of RE7's cloud port by adding back motion controls. They're extra important in this game, where not getting a headshot might as well be the same as throwing ammo away. On top of the coin pack, this version also comes with all the DLC included from the jump, which rules. The RE7 DLCs are mostly forgotten today, which is a shame because they're fun, but also I can't blame anyone because I barely played them at all during my hundreds of hours in the PS4 and PC version combined. They're too arcadey to make sense for at-home play. Once again, I am discussing the difference in game design / ludology that comes from the handheld form factor. The level of dedication that comes with sitting down on a couch or at your desk to dedicate 100% of your attention to a video game that's over 9 years old versus the level of dedication that comes with playing a silly game during your commute or your lunch break or trying not to draw attention to yourself while your boyfriend tells the waiter you asked for no pickles is essential to understanding the DLC. For instance, in Ethan Must Die, a super difficult mode where you have to speedrun throughout the first half of the game with randomized item pickups, you lose all of your progress when you die, and you have to return to the very start, so it's more likely you're just going to get more and more tilted when you could be, at any point, doing your stay-at-home job, or working on another hobby, or other stuff. My brother has great memories from when he was in high school. Him and his friends would all play Ethan Must Die and pass the controller around, discussing strategies to get through it and staying up into late hours of the night. I have never experienced this, because I'm currently in my senior year of high school and stay up late into the night writing thousands of words about Japanese action games. But it's an important story to describe how the environment of playing games is more important than the game's quality itself. The game being on Switch makes it a better game, because it recontextualizes the way you engage with it. I can do a run of Ethan Must Die when there's a substitute teacher, but when I'm at home I should be doing more productive stuff. This holds the same for Jack's 55th birthday, this game's weird version of the Mercenaries, and Nightmare, a short game where you have to defend against an onslaught of monsters until sunrise that you replay several times for unlockables that only affect this mode, or 21 Survival, a blackjack deck building card game that you are also expected to replay several times for unlockables that only affect this mode. When I'm at home, I am not going to be replaying the same minigame instead of playing any of the other games in my backlog, but when I'm at home and too depressed to leave my bed and my Switch is on my nightstand instead of all the way over my desk that's miles away, sure, I can play a little blackjack. I must now confess to you that it is for this reason that RE7 and RE8 are the only games in the series that I haven't 100%ed. I got the Platinum Trophy in RE1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but not 7 and 8 because they felt too grindy. I was never able to beat Marguerite on Madhouse before because whenever I died I lost so much progress I was more likely to do something else with my time. But on Switch 2, I actually beat Madhouse for the first time ever and it was absolutely an experience. Which is good. Living life is having a bunch of experiences. Yes, I have experienced basically the exact same thing dozens of times, but you know, it's fine. At least then I spent several weeks of my life talking about it. This video's been in development for like 3 months. RE8 has almost the exact same things I could say about RE7. RE8 is actually my least played RE game because I played through it when it came out when I was only 13 years old and got kind of burnt out on it after getting all the achievements that were actually good. I missed a few that were really grindy because having to play the entire game again because I missed one window in Castle Dimitrescu was something that I couldn't justify to myself. But not so much on the Nintendo Switch 2 family of systems with the Resident Evil Village Gold Edition game. Unfortunately, I'd like for this video to release before the heat death of the universe, so I didn't get a lot of the more time-consuming challenges, but I am very proud to admit that for the first time since I was in middle school, I delved into RE8's Mercenaries mode. The praises I give to RE8's Mercenary mode are the same that I extend to RE7's DLCs. It's much easier to get invested when there isn't so much opportunity cost, so I was able to unlock the LZ Answerer for the first time, getting an SS rank on every stage. And with that, I learned it was a lightsaber this whole time. It uses the same model as the targeting system for Chris. I thought it was just that. I thought it was just that you would get to use that in the game, but it was a freaking lightsaber? How did I never realize this when I was a kid? I mean, I was probably a bit distracted. I mean, playing Village when I was just hitting puberty and being devastated each time I had to fight one of the vampires probably... No, actually, it didn't probably have an effect on me. This one's pretty definitive.